Well, today on Photo Friday, we're going to talk about being more creative with our photography. So, how do we be more creative with our photography? For me, I think it's about aperture control. So, today on Photo Friday, let's talk about aperture control. So I'm here by myself today, so you're stuck with me, and we're going to do something a little bit different. We're actually going to talk about controlling your aperture. Okay, so what is an aperture? An aperture is defined as a hole or an opening through which light is allowed to enter our camera. And now inside our camera lens, there's a system of blades which open and close to increase or decrease the amount of light into our cameras. Now that increase or decrease of light happens because of what is called f-stops. Those f-stops like f1.8 or f5.6, f11, that is the numbers that actually control the opening. So a smaller number means that we are going to have a wider opening. f2.0 is referred to as a larger aperture. More light gets in, so we can use a faster shutter speed. A larger number, like f22, is referred to as a small aperture, which means a smaller opening. Now, I think this is where aperture control gets lost on a lot of people who are just starting out in photography. You wouldn't believe the amount of times that Karen and I have been out talking to photographers, and I mean, they're really passionate about what they're doing, but at the end of the conversation or somewhere in the conversation, we hear that phrase, you know, I wish I could shoot in manual mode, but I just don't get this whole thing with the aperture. I don't know what the numbers mean. Am I supposed to use a big number, a small number? What does it even mean? So that's really what we're here to do today, is to kind of give you an idea of how your aperture can help you create a very more visually pleasing image. So how do you do that? Like, how does that even happen? Well, our aperture is really all about depth of field, DOF. And as you can see with the chart that we have here, at f2.5, you're going to have a smaller or a shallower depth of field. And if you go over to the right, you'll see that at f22, we have a bigger or a larger depth of field. So really, what ends up happening is the aperture controls the depth of field, or the DOF, which refers to how much of your image is actually in focus. Now, this is where the creative process comes into play. Now, a wider aperture or a smaller f-stop will give you a shallower depth of field, which can isolate a subject. Now, if you take a look at the picture that we have here, what we wanted to be able to do is we wanted to tell the story about the flower. That's what this image was all about for us. So to help focus the eye on the flower, what we did is we got a little creative. And that creativity was basically taking our aperture and opening it up wide to a 5.0 so that we created a shallow or a smaller depth of field. Now, by doing that, what ended up happening was we created what's called a bokeh effect. So everything in behind our subject is out of focus, which allows the eye to focus in on the story that we're trying to tell, which is the flower. So our aperture helps us control our depth of field. And by controlling our depth of field, that helps us either isolate our subject, or we can actually include our subject in our photograph. And by utilizing our depth of field, by changing our f-stops, helps us be more creative with our photography. So let's take a look at the actual process of how the aperture affects the DOF or the depth of field in our photography as we adjust our f-stops. Keep an eye on the middle and the last plant. Also keep an eye on the back wall where the clock is. And as we go through each f-stop, you can see the DOF become larger. So sorry guys, this was shot handheld, and I didn't actually use a tripod when I shot this segment of the video. So you can see the table shifting back and forth as you progress through each of the slides and the different f-stops. But at least now you have an understanding of how to adjust your aperture and how that affects your depth of field. So the question is, how do we use what we've just learned in a real-world application when we're out in the field taking photographs? Well, we've put together a couple of videos to give you an idea of how you can use your aperture settings to be more creative when you're taking photos. So take a look. So earlier I said I would provide you with a method to help you understand how you can utilize your aperture and f-stop a lot easier. So let's look at it from this point of view. Your depth of field and your apertures are related to each other. So if you keep that in mind, what I'm about to say to you is going to be fairly easy to understand. So you're out in the field and you come upon a beautiful flower. You bend down, take a picture of the flower, and everything's in focus. But let's just say you want to be able to get a little bit more creative with that image. And this is why aperture is so important. So let's just say you focus in on that flower, and let's just say before you're shooting an f11. Well, let's try shooting that at maybe 5.6, right? So what you've done is you're actually shooting a smaller depth of field. So when you actually want to shoot a smaller depth of field, you use a smaller number. So you're out, you want to maybe shoot a landscape. Well, you want a bigger depth of field. That means you're going to use a bigger number. So you're going to use a bigger f-stop number for a bigger depth of field, and you're going to use a smaller f-stop number for a smaller depth of field. Now, I don't know about you, but that makes things a lot easier for me when I'm out there and I'm trying to remember what it is that I want to do. Because once I actually get an idea of how I want to shoot it, then I automatically know, okay, well, I want a small depth of field. Well, then I want to use a small f-stop number. Now that we have an understanding of what your DOF or depth of field can do for you and how it can help you be a little bit more creative with your images, how do you go about using this in the real world? We've got some images and some video that we shot when we are actually out at Beacon Hill that can help you along and kind of give you some ideas of how you can be a little bit more creative when you're shooting and utilizing your aperture and taking that f-stop to the next level, and also taking your images to the next level as well. We'll be right back. All right, so we're back. Now, you know what? The one thing I really enjoy about being in a park is that it gives you the opportunity to be really creative with your camera. Especially this time of the year, coming into spring, you've got all these new flowers that are coming up. It gives you an opportunity to really do some really unique things. But let's get back to what we were talking about originally, and that is aperture. So you can see that we've got this amazing fountain behind me here. And what I really like about it is the fact that we've got a really nice metal bench here that we can actually utilize and have the fountain in the background. And by utilizing our aperture, we can change the feel of our picture. So I'm going to take a couple of pictures. I'm going to post up what my settings were, how I set this up, and then you can take a look and see how that aperture affects the picture. So this would be an amazing shot right here, just taking in the fountain. But I think it would actually be better from over here. We've got the foliage, the trees, and we're actually creating a frame around the fountain. Sometimes you just need to look a a little bit deeper in the areas that you're in, even in a park, and you can find some pretty outstanding pictures. So I'm going to take some shots here, and we'll play around with the aperture, and you can see how that can affect the overall feel of your picture. We'll talk to you in a bit. Hey everybody, how you doing? Well, I hope this video helped you with gaining a better understanding of how you can use your aperture to create some very unique photos. Now, there is one thing that I would like you to try. If you are a beginner and you're just learning how to shoot, do yourself a favor, grab 2 or 3 glasses, set them up in line like we did with the plants, okay, in the images that we showed earlier, and play around with your camera. Set it on a good tripod. And if you've never actually shot in manual mode, set your camera to your automatic mode. Get everything set up and then switch it to manual mode. Once you've switched it to manual mode, you're already going to know, or you're already going to have to know, which of your dials is going to change your aperture. Now, generally on the Canon camera, I believe it is the top roller that will change the aperture on the left-hand side in your visual screen when you're looking through your viewfinder. Now, what I want you to do, just so you can practice and really get an idea, is take 3 glasses, set them up the way that we did with the actual plants that we shot earlier, and start at your lowest. So start at 5.6, then go to 7.1, maybe shoot at f11, then try to go to f14 and then f16, and then take those images, put them in the DPP or whatever software you have, and take a look at them. And you're going to actually be able to see how it actually works. It's really, really unique when you actually do it on your own and actually see how the f-stop is changing and how your depth of field is increasing as you change those f-stops. So try it, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. But I think that's a really cool way of being able to learn how to actually utilize your f-stops. Now, one more thing I want to mention to you. Karen and I have put together a little PDF booklet that you can download from our website, and it's a little bit more in depth, has a little bit more information about utilizing your f-stop, utilizing your shutter speed, and a few other little interesting tidbits of information that you can download for free. So in the comments below, you're going to find a link to our website. Please go ahead. You don't have to give us your email or anything like that. It's just there for you to download and review. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send them through to us. And maybe we can answer them for you on our next Photo Friday. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. We look forward to seeing you next week at our next Photo Friday. So take care and bye from T.O.L on the road.